This video is for educational purposes only, not medical advice. This is not a substitute for proper wound care. Seek medical attention for any deep, large, or infected wound, or any wound that isn't healing properly. Always consult your doctor, especially if you have diabetes, poor circulation, or take blood thinners. You know that sting. The sharp, breath-catching bite of rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide the second it touches an open scrape, the kind that makes you flinch before you can stop yourself, every single time, no matter how many times you've done it before, no matter how much you tell yourself it won't hurt this time. You know the bandage too, the one that won't quite stay stuck to the edge of your hand, curling up within an hour, no matter which brand you buy or how carefully you press it down. And if you're over 60, you know something else. You know how a small scrape that used to heal in 3 days now seems to linger for a week or more? Your skin just a little thinner and slower to bounce back than it used to be. A change so gradual you almost didn't notice it happening until one day you did. Norman has a cabinet full of antiseptic sprays, ointments, and bandages of every size, shape, and brand, replaced every time one runs out without much thought, and none of it has ever made the actual healing feel any faster. He's never once wondered what people used before any of it existed, before there was a pharmacy aisle to reach for it all. Here's what almost nobody realizes. There's a substance mentioned by name in one of the most famous stories Jesus ever told, poured directly onto an injured man's wounds by a stranger who stopped to help him on the side of the road. Not a modern antiseptic, not a bandage, something else entirely, something that's been sitting in most kitchens this entire time. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it was, why it was chosen specifically for that purpose, and one gentle way to use it on a minor scrape tonight, if you need to. If you're new here, subscribe to Ancestral Fix. Every week we find what the ancient world knew and what your body still needs. Stay with me. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan, a man beaten, robbed, and left half dead on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, passed by a priest and a Levite who both crossed to the other side of the road rather than help him, each finding their own reason to keep walking. Then a Samaritan, a man from a group the original audience would have expected to have every reason to keep walking too, given the deep tension between Samaritans and Jews at the time, stops instead. And here's the exact detail the story gives us about what he did next, a detail specific enough that it clearly wasn't just filler. He knelt down and poured oil and wine on the man's wounds before bandaging them and taking him to an inn to recover. Oil and wine. Not a metaphor. Not a vague gesture of kindness added for poetic effect. A specific, deliberate first aid treatment, described precisely enough that it was clearly something the original listeners would have recognized immediately as a real, practical thing to do for a wound, the same way we'd immediately recognize someone reaching for a first aid kit today. Ever wonder why those two specific substances, out of everything a traveler in that period might have been carrying? That's worth understanding. Wine, in the ancient world, was mildly acidic, and travelers and physicians of the period commonly used it as a rinse for wounds, based on a long tradition of practical experience rather than any understanding of germs, which wouldn't be scientifically identified for another 18 centuries. Olive oil, poured on afterward, would have helped soothe the wound, keep the surrounding skin from drying and cracking further, and create a protective barrier before the wound was bandaged. Together, the two substances covered two different jobs, one to rinse, one to soothe and protect, using exactly what a traveler in that region would reasonably have had on hand. This is the part that keeps Norman's cabinet full of products from making much sense to him once he actually thinks about it. Modern rubbing alcohol works largely the same way that ancient wine did, chemically speaking, causing that same sharp sting as it cleans, just far more concentrated and considerably more effective at killing bacteria than diluted ancient wine ever could have been. That sting was never proof that something is working better. It's simply proof that alcohol irritates exposed nerve endings, and gentler options have always existed alongside it, quietly, even if they've never been quite as effective at killing germs as modern antiseptics genuinely are. Let's move into why this matters more specifically after 60. Skin naturally becomes thinner and slower to heal as we age, losing some of the collagen and elasticity that once made small wounds bounce back quickly, and harsh antiseptics, the kind that sting on contact, can sometimes irritate already fragile skin around a wound more than a gentler approach would. This doesn't mean modern antiseptics are wrong or unnecessary, especially for a wound at real risk of infection. It means that for a small, clean scrape, a gentler first step, followed by proper cleaning if needed, is worth having in your own routine, right alongside whatever's already in Norman's cabinet. Now, before you pour wine directly on your next paper cut, an important line belongs here. This approach applies only to small, clean, minor scrapes and cuts. Any deep wound, any wound that won't stop bleeding, any bite, any wound showing signs of infection like increasing redness, warmth, swelling, or pus needs actual medical attention, not a kitchen remedy. If you have diabetes, poor circulation, or take blood thinners, any wound at all deserves extra caution and, often, a call to your doctor rather than a home approach. So how would this actually translate to something useful today? For a small, clean scrape, gently rinsing with cool, clean water first is still the most important step, exactly as it's always been. A small amount of plain olive oil, dabbed gently around, not directly inside, a minor scrape once it's clean, can help keep the surrounding skin from drying out and cracking while it heals, similar in spirit to what that Samaritan was doing on the road to Jericho. This isn't a replacement for an actual antiseptic on anything beyond the most minor scrape, but it's a gentle, additional step worth knowing, especially for skin that's become more delicate with age. There's something worth sitting with in the fact that a story about compassion, about stopping for someone everyone else walked past, included a detail specific enough to double as real medical instruction. The Samaritan didn't happen to have modern antiseptic. He used exactly what a traveler in his world would have had, applied with real care, and it was enough. This is really the same quiet theme running through so much of what we cover on this channel. It's not that ancient remedies are secretly superior to modern medicine for anything serious. Modern medical care is exactly where you should go without hesitation. It's that some of what we've come to think of as complicated or expensive was, for most of history, simply whatever was already sitting on the table, used with attention and care. Let's come back to where we started. Norman, standing in front of a cabinet full of products that all still sting, never once realizing that the story of the Good Samaritan was quietly giving him a gentler option this whole time. And a stranger on a dusty road, kneeling beside someone he had no obligation to help, using oil and wine because that's simply what he had, and it was enough to matter. If there's one thing to take from today, let it be this. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do for a small wound isn't the thing that stings the most. It's simply showing up and using what's already close at hand. This video is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. This does not replace proper wound care or medical treatment. Seek medical attention for any deep, large, spreading, or infected wound, and always consult your doctor if you have diabetes, poor circulation, or take blood thinners. If this kind of ancestral wisdom speaks to you, consider subscribing. Because next time, we're looking at a weapon the Byzantine Empire used for 800 years that was so effective and so secret, the formula disappeared when the empire fell. We'd love to have you along.